Okay. So the next most common variation in the Petrov is called the Nimsowitch attack. And it goes e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6, we have knight takes, d6, knight back, knight takes. Okay. So this is the Petrov opening, this is the start here. We went over queen e2 and d4, so let's go over the Nimsowitch. More popular than queen e2, actually. Which I believe is called the Kozio attack, so that's a fun name. Knight c3 is the Nimsowitch attack. Why is this an attack? Well, again, if the knight goes to c3, you should take it. You actually could bring the knight back. This is fine. You could bring the knight back. But if you're going to try to play for an advantage, if you're going to try to play solidly, you really should take the knight here. That is the best move. So knight takes knight. Stockfish for a second recommended taking with the b-pawn. Don't take with the b-pawn. In this attack, you want to take with the d-pawn. The reason being, white is planning to castle queenside and start these pawns rolling down the board and start an attack with the major pieces in the center of the board. So that's what he's going to do. He's going to try to kill black, basically. And black, usually in this situation, also tries to castle queenside. So bishop e7 is the main line, just developing the bishop. And again, in this line, you want to reroute the bishop to f6. That's what happens whenever you put the bishop on e7. So bishop e3, getting the queenside bishop developed. White now wants to start developing his pieces, so knight c6, developing queenside knight. Queen d2, preparing to castle. And here it says, Stockfish likes castling here, but I wouldn't recommend castling queenside. I would recommend castling queenside as well as white. That does the best to blunt white's attack. So bishop e6 instead, developing your other queenside piece. White goes castles, and now you can go bishop queen d7. And here white should go king b1, and in this position, both sides are attacking. Black is slightly behind, but he has many plans of attack. He could go a6. He could go bishop f6, preparing, put the bishop on the long diagonal. He could castle queenside, or he could even castle kingside, although I wouldn't recommend it. And after this other move, h4, which is actually the second most popular move. Yeah, and I like this line, actually, for white. White's going to try to start a kingside pawn storm and expand his territory. And if black castles kingside into this, it's a dangerous thing. Although the grandmasters have done pretty well in this position. Although there are only 5 games, so I don't know. h6 main line, king b1. And yeah, now it's only draws and white wins. So definitely white has an advantage here, a slight edge. But both sides are going to be looking to attack, and I like this position for black because you have a solid position, and it's going to be a fairly simple, straightforward game. You just want to castle and develop your pieces. So knight here, and then takes. Black gets a good pawn. No, black's, yeah. So black could take with a pawn, get a good pawn. And then you push d4 to stop that pawn from pushing. Black might develop his bishop, and then you develop yours. You know, it could just be a simple developing game. And this is just fine. This is a reasonable variation. So, finally, we are going to the scariest line in the Petrov. And this is also known as, I've heard it called the Urusov, but I don't believe it is the Urusov. I think it's something else. So we're in the Petrov, and instead of taking the pawn here, rather than taking on e5, I've seen this so often in blitz games. White just plays bishop c4, going for the attack. And here, you really have to go knight takes e4. This is the best chance for black, and this is actually, of all the lines in the Petrov, this is the strongest for black. You can see that the Grandmaster's black wins about 40% of the time here. And white only wins about 20% of the time. So after takes, there are a few options. Knight takes e5, I've seen it played a lot, but it's actually not the best line here. The best line is knight c3. And this is called the Boden-Kiesertsky Gambit. So again, when the knight goes to c3, you got to take it. White's going to take here, and he's going to castle queenside and start a very strong attack. So here you have only one move that works. You have to play f6. This is a hard line to remember because it gets complicated. You have to play f6 here. There's no other way to defend the e-pawn. If you try this move, let's try d6. Yeah, this fails to a fried liver style attack on f7, knight g5. So you have to play f6 because this stops knight g5 because of course you just take it. And now white has to start an attack. So knight h4, and the plan is to go queen h5 check, and if he blocks with the pawn, you take it. So let's say you play a normal move here, c6. Now white's again ahead with this trick. After pawn takes, he takes the rook, and he's up in exchange with good attacking chances as well. Very active pieces. So to stop queen h5, you have to play g6 here. Now the most common line for white is f4, continuing with the attack. And again, I would say there are multiple moves here. Queen e7 is possible, but I wouldn't go into that line because it's very complicated and hard to play. The best move, and I think the easiest to play, is c6 here. And the idea is you're going to push g5 and get a strong center, and then you can just develop your bishop and defend this pawn. And you actually usually in this line want to put your queen on d7 and hide your king on d8. So I'll show you what I mean here. You don't want to castle kingside because that's where white's pieces are all pointing. So f5, you can go d5 in response. And then this is fine. You have f takes, and then you go queen d7, just allowing this line. He's going to go queen h5, the most forcing variance. And now, obviously, you have to get your king out of this line of fire of the queen. So you go king d8, and now black really has no moves, or white really has no moves here. You can take the pawn, but you just take with the rook. The queen has to go back. You can try this line, but this just results in mass trades. And actually, never mind. White's way ahead after this, so this is a mistake. So you have to move the queen back now, and yeah, black's way ahead after this. So that's just a mistake. Also note that the bishop's attacked, so white does have to do something about the bishop now. So say bishop e2. Now you just want to go, what did I say here? Queen g7, preparing to take this pawn with this attack on the queen. If something like this, you just take it, so you're fine. And the most common line, let's say white goes g3, defending the knight. I'm not sure why I have that as the main move. Okay, not that as the main move. Let's say white goes bishop d2, developing. Now you want to take, opening up an attack on the queen, and after queen takes, don't trade off here. You don't have to trade off. Now you can just take the knight. So yeah, here it's just black's gonna make a home on c7. That's where the king wants to be, and he's just gonna try to get a queen trade and just be up some pawns. And if you look at his majority of pawns in the center, he has 3 pawns in the center, and white has no pawns in the center. And he's just gonna make an easy win in the endgame if he can trade off queens. So that's his plan here. And there are a few other things that that white can do, but they're not as threatening. So after this. So if knight takes here, you want to go d5. It's tempting to go queen e7. It looks like that actually wins for a second. The problem is he has this move, bishop takes f7. And after the king moves, he just defends the knight, and everything's well defended. If he goes here, you can just castle. And this is now a very scary attack. I wouldn't go into this. So if you're going to play for tricks, you could do that. But the best move is d5. You usually want to play d5 against whatever white does, unless they play knight c6, knight c3. So let's say after this move, instead of takes, he goes castles, d5, and you're fine. Let's say instead of takes, he goes queen e2, d5. Instead of takes, and queen e2 is the other main line that I see here. If he goes here, you want to just bring the knight back to f6. Don't worry about it. Don't go d5. You can. I have before. This is a move that is playable. But I would say just retreat the knight. Knight f6 is fine. You have knight takes, and then you play d5. So, in a lot of variations, d5 is your best move. d5 is one of the reasons to play the Petrov, because black gets an equal pawn center. He often gets a strong knight on e4, and he gets an equal position a lot of the time. So it can be drawish, but against players who are not grandmasters, and most of us are not grandmasters, I know I'm not, the Petrov is a great weapon because it gives you an equal position very easily, and it gives you positions that are very natural and straightforward to play, unless your opponent goes 3 bishop c4, in which case take and be prepared for an attack. But know that this is actually the strongest line. If your opponent plays bishop c4, you're actually very much ahead, according to the computer.